My name is Sammy Ruiz, and for 15 years, I was the operations lead at Timberline Foods in Cedar Falls, Iowa. A place where integrity used to mean something. We weren't a flashy company. No national commercials, no celebrity endorsements. But our food ended up in hundreds of grocery stores across 3 states, and every item that left our warehouse had my signature behind it, literally and morally. I'm 42 years old, a veteran of the U.S. Army, a husband, and a father of 2. I didn't go to college. What I know, I learned with my hands and by paying attention. You want to know the first thing they drill into you in logistics? Chain of custody. You know what that means in food distribution? It means someone has to take responsibility from start to finish. If that chain breaks, people get hurt. And someone was breaking it deliberately. 3 months ago, Timberline got a new general manager, Trevor Maddox. Big smile, firm handshake, fake charm. You know the type. He showed up in loafers too shiny for a warehouse and started spouting buzzwords like optimization and turnover acceleration. I gave him the benefit of the doubt, until the paperwork started not adding up. First, I noticed the override logs. Shipments being processed without final inspection. Batches that were marked cleared before they even reached the cold storage area. Labels updated manually, something no one had done since we automated 5 years ago. Then came the shipments. Pallets of refrigerated items that had been sitting in storage far too long were suddenly pushed to priority distribution. Normally, product that close to expiry gets disposed of, strict protocol. But this stuff was going out to retailers with no indication anything was wrong. I asked questions. Trevor gave me smiles. We're just adjusting timelines, he said. Reducing waste. What he meant was, bend the rules to keep profits fat. The truth hit me hard one Friday morning, 2 weeks into his so-called efficiency program. I came in early, my usual 5 a.m. walk of the floor, and found the cold storage lights on. Voices. I stayed back behind the insulation curtain, and what I saw made my stomach turn. Trevor and another guy I didn't recognize, no ID badge, no uniform, were relabeling cold cuts with new expiration stickers. They peeled off the manufacturer's label, printed fresh ones, and slapped them on like it was nothing. This is USDA safe, Trevor said to his mystery accomplice. Sammy's just old school. He won't get it. I froze. Not out of fear, but fury. I'd built this warehouse into a place people trusted. My crew respected me. And this smug con artist was tossing it all for a quick quarterly bonus. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Jessica, my daughter. She's 20, in college studying nutrition science. She wants to go into food safety because she said she grew up watching me care about the work. That work, that name, was now being dragged through the mud. And no one was going to save it but me. On Monday, I filed a report with our regional HQ. I included batch numbers, timestamps, notes on anomalies. I didn't include the label switching, yet. I wanted to see if they'd respond. They didn't. 3 days later, I was removed from the floor entirely. Administrative reassignment, Trevor called it. I was stuck at a desk doing vendor paperwork while my warehouse, my people, were being pulled into something dangerous and illegal. Then, the final insult, a formal, performance improvement plan. Claims that I was disruptive, resistant to modernization, and creating confusion. A warning that any more obstruction would lead to termination. Obstruction? Is that what they called protecting families from tainted meat? I stared at that paper in his office and said nothing. I didn't argue. I didn't shout. I just stood, nodded, and walked out. Because I knew what I had to do. When I walked out of Trevor's office that afternoon, the air outside felt heavier. Like it was pressing down on my chest. I sat in my car with the unsigned performance plan in my hands and just stared at it. 15 years. 15 damn years I'd given to that place. Missed birthdays. Missed anniversaries. Late nights, early mornings, snowstorms, power outages, didn't matter. I was always there. And now I was the liability. I drove home in silence. Didn't turn the radio on. Didn't call Claire. My wife was used to me coming home tired, but when I walked through the door that night, she knew something was different. What happened? I handed her the paper. She read it once, twice, and sat down at the kitchen table. They're pushing you out. I nodded. Because I know too much. Because I saw something they can't risk getting out. She was quiet for a long time before she finally said, "So what now?" I didn't have an answer. I felt lost. That night, I barely slept. I kept thinking about the families buying our products. The single mom feeding her kids sandwiches with expired turkey. The elderly couple shopping on a budget, trusting that the labels meant something. And then I thought about my team, Luis, Danielle, Cody, people I'd trained. People who trusted me. If the FDA came down hard, they'd suffer too. People would lose jobs. Reputations. Maybe even face legal fallout if it looked like they were complicit. I'd already sent one internal report. Nothing happened. If I went further, if I became a whistleblower, I could lose everything, my job, my health benefits, my pension. We weren't rich. Jessica's college tuition wasn't cheap. And Lucas, our youngest, had just gotten diagnosed with asthma. Inhalers. Emergency visits. The works. And yet, I couldn't walk away. I couldn't unsee what I saw. I couldn't become the kind of man who looked the other way when people's lives were at stake. By Friday, I was being openly avoided in the warehouse. Not out of malice, out of fear. People sensed something was wrong. Trevor's people, new hires, mostly, were taking over operations. My crew didn't know who to trust. And I was a ghost in the building I'd once run. Then came the worst moment of all. Jessica called me that night, bubbling with excitement. "Dad, guess what? I got the internship." I forced a smile into my voice. "That's incredible, sweetheart. Where at?" "The FDA. Their regional food compliance office in Des Moines." My throat closed up. Claire looked at me from across the room, eyebrows raised. I gave her a tiny shake of my head. "Dad, they said my application essay really stood out. I told them about growing up with you and how you taught me that food safety isn't just about rules, it's about people. They said that kind of passion is exactly what they look for." I wanted to be happy for her. I was. But guilt washed over me like a wave. Because the company I'd given my life to, was exactly the kind of threat she was preparing to fight. That night, after everyone went to bed, I opened my laptop. I stared at the screen for over an hour before I finally typed in FDA Whistleblower Food Safety Report, submit. The form was long. Detailed. But I didn't rush. I included everything, batch numbers, date discrepancies, procedures being skipped, names of staff involved. I attached the security camera timestamps that matched what I'd witnessed. I uploaded photos I'd taken with my personal phone of the relabeled packages. Then I typed one last sentence. "I have nothing to gain from this. But I know what I saw. And it's wrong. People will get hurt if this continues." I hit send. Then I sat back in the dark, my hands shaking, and whispered to myself, "Please, let this be enough." The next morning, Trevor fired me. No pretense. No final warning. No HR mediation. Just a letter waiting in my locker and a security guard escorting me out before I could even say goodbye to my crew. The worst part? The look in Luis's eyes when he passed me by in the parking lot. "Sammy. What's going on?" I just shook my head and said, "Take care of yourself, brother." As I drove away from Timberline, one word kept echoing in my mind. Gone. Gone was the job I'd built my life around. Gone was the respect I'd earned. Gone was the routine that had made me feel like I mattered. But the truth? That was still mine. And I wasn't done with it yet. After I got fired, I didn't tell Claire right away. I just drove. An hour, then two, aimlessly through the flat stretches of Iowa farmland. The same roads I used to take deliveries on when I first started at Timberline. Back then, I used to dream about building something steady, dependable, like a brick wall no one could knock over. Now it felt like someone had dynamited the foundation while I was still inside. When I got home that evening, Claire met me at the door. I didn't have to say a word. "They fired you," she said softly. I nodded. She didn't cry. She didn't yell. She just walked into the kitchen, poured me a glass of water, and slid it across the table. "They picked the wrong man to underestimate," she said. And just like that, the fog in my chest started to clear. 2 days later, I got a call, from a number I didn't recognize. "Is this Sammy Ruiz?" "Yes. This is Inspector Miriam Novak with the FDA's regional office. We received your report." My pulse spiked. I stepped into my backyard so the kids wouldn't hear. "We've been watching Timberline for a few months," she continued. "Your submission connected several dots we've been trying to piece together." I blinked. "Wait, you were already investigating?" She paused. "Yes." Quietly. "But your documentation, batch numbers, timestamp discrepancies, even the label photographs, you just handed us the missing link. This is no longer a routine audit. This is criminal fraud with potential public health violations." I sat down on the porch steps. "We need more, Mr. Ruiz," she said. "Internal access is limited now that you've been terminated, but if you have anything at all, we can use to confirm label tampering or falsified shipping data, it could justify a full facility lockdown." I told her I'd think. But I already knew. I still had something. Back before Trevor started locking me out of system permissions, I'd made copies of a few odd logs, partly out of habit, partly instinct. Shipping manifests that didn't align with product intake records. Notes from Trevor with vague instructions like expedite shelf extension and clean tags before Tuesday delivery. At the time, they seemed suspicious but inconclusive. Now, they were gold. I emailed everything to Inspector Novak that night. Then I dug into something that, until then, hadn't even occurred to me, the vendors. I remembered a guy from my early days at Timberline, Samir, a driver from our labeling supplier. He used to joke about how many rolls of blank label stock we ordered compared to other facilities. "Y'all stick more than you sell," he'd laugh. Back then, it was funny. Now, it was a red flag. So I called him. "Samir, it's Sammy. From Timberline. Hey, brother. Been a minute. Everything okay?" I hesitated. "Not really. Listen, off the record. Do you have records of how many label shipments we ordered this year?" He was quiet for a second. "You're not gonna get me in trouble, right?" "No. But if something illegal's happening, you deserve to know too." He sighed. "All I know is, your facility ordered 30% more blank date rolls than last year. That's weird. Especially since your distribution volume didn't change. I asked once, and your new GM said it was for inventory reclassification. Whatever that means." I thanked him and hung up. Inventory reclassification? No. It was fraud, plain and simple. But what I discovered next made my stomach turn. That night, I found a public notice buried in a local news site: 3 children in Omaha had been hospitalized from suspected listeria. The grocery store they bought from? Lonterra Foods. We supplied Lonterra. I cross-referenced the shipment dates with our logs. It matched. Trevor had sent out expired deli meat relabeled as fresh. Kids got sick. The reality of it hit me harder than I expected. This wasn't about policy anymore. This was criminal endangerment. I picked up the phone and called Inspector Novak. "We've got more than label fraud," I told her. "We've got confirmed illnesses from products that came through Timberline." There was silence on the other end. "Then, send me everything. Now." Over the next 48 hours, the FDA escalated the investigation. The state health department got involved. Inspector Novak informed me that they would be arriving in person, within the week. They were coming with federal enforcement power. Trevor had no idea what was heading his way. But there was still one last discovery that would push things over the edge. A USB drive. I found it in my old desk drawer, one I'd cleared out when they fired me, tossed in the back of my closet without thinking. On it? Archived security footage. Weeks worth. Backups I'd requested months earlier as part of a system test. I almost didn't check it. But when I did, there it was. Clear as day. Trevor personally peeling off expiration labels and replacing them. Multiple times. Multiple pallets. Even laughing with another manager while doing it. I uploaded the footage. And I pressed send. Trevor thought firing me would be the end of the problem. He had no idea I was about to become the beginning of his downfall. I didn't sleep much the night I sent that USB footage. Not because I was afraid. Because I was ready. You see, there's a moment, after the betrayal, after the tears, after the humiliation, when something shifts. The wound doesn't heal, but it stops bleeding. And what's left isn't weakness. It's resolve. I woke up that next morning with a list already forming in my head. If Trevor and Timberline thought I was done, they were about to find out I hadn't even started. The first call I made was to my union rep, Carla James. She was sharp, quiet, and not easily rattled. I told her everything, starting with the label switching, the retaliation, and finally, the termination under false pretenses. When I mentioned the FDA, she got real quiet. "You documented all of this?" "Every bit." She let out a low whistle. "Sammy, they messed with the wrong guy." We met later that afternoon. Carla was already drafting a wrongful termination claim, citing whistleblower retaliation under federal protection statutes. She also advised me to file a formal complaint with OSHA and the State Labor Board. But that was just one prong of the plan. The next part. I needed the media. So I reached out to a local investigative journalist, Darren Kessler, the kind of guy who'd covered everything from corporate tax fraud to meatpacking plant scandals. I didn't give him everything, just enough to light the fuse. "Why are you coming to me?" he asked during our call. "Because there are sick kids in hospitals, and someone's still shipping contaminated food across 3 states. If you want the story, I'll give you the rest, but I want the truth front and center. Not spin. Not corporate apologies. The truth." He agreed. And then, the final piece of my plan fell into place with a single unexpected phone call. "Mr. Ruiz. This is Martin Reyes from Keystone Fresh Logistics. We've been following the Timberline situation, and your name keeps coming up." I froze. "I'm not sure what you mean," I said, cautious. "We've heard about the FDA investigation. About your whistleblower report. And about the evidence you provided." I stayed silent. "We'd like to meet. You're the kind of professional we value, one who understands that integrity isn't optional." He offered me a position. Head of Compliance and Safety for the entire Midwest region. Triple what I was making before. Full benefits. Jessica's tuition. Covered under their education family grant program. I didn't say yes. Not yet. Because I had one more thing to do. Face Trevor. I emailed him directly, knowing he'd read it the moment it landed in his inbox. You always said safety protocols were outdated. Let's see what the FDA thinks. Oh, and you should check the security footage folder you forgot to delete. I pictured his face the moment he opened it. The panic. The realization. He thought he'd buried me. But I'd been digging, too, just not a grave. A foundation. One built with facts, footage, and federal law. The next 72 hours moved like a storm. Carla filed the formal retaliation complaint. Darren ran a teaser on the local news, whistleblower exposes food safety violations, children hospitalized, more at risk. And the FDA called to confirm, they were launching a surprise full facility inspection. Unannounced. Immediate. But I wasn't just waiting on the sidelines anymore. The night before the inspection, I did one more thing. I sent a personal message, anonymous, from a burner account, to 5 of my most trusted former colleagues still working the floor. If anyone asks, tell them the truth. You didn't know what was going on. But now you do. Protect yourselves. And remember, this place wasn't always like this. You deserve better. Because revenge isn't just about watching your enemy fall. It's about making sure the people they drag down with them finally get a chance to rise. The call came in just after 6:30 a.m. This is Inspector Novak. We're on site. I sat up in bed. My phone buzzed again, this time, from Darren. Breaking, federal raid at Timberline Foods Cedar Falls facility. My heart was pounding. It was happening. Claire walked in, holding a cup of coffee. She set it down in front of me. Is it today? I nodded. They're there now. She didn't say anything, just smiled and put a hand on my shoulder. Then today is the day he learns what accountability tastes like. At 7:15 a.m., the first pictures hit the local news. Black SUVs with federal plates. Agents in FDA jackets. A team from the State Department of Public Health. They entered Timberline's warehouse like it was a crime scene. Because it was. I drove out to the parking lot across the street from the facility. I couldn't get closer, media and law enforcement had blocked off the front. But I could see enough. Trevor was outside, red-faced, arguing with 2 agents. I watched him wave his hands, demanding answers, pointing at the building like it was betraying him too. He looked smaller than I remembered. At 9 a.m., I got the call I'd been waiting for. Mr. Ruiz, this is Inspector Kellerman. We've reviewed the materials. Your evidence lines up exactly with what we're finding. He paused. Frankly, we've never seen a facility so well documented by a whistleblower. You were meticulous. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. What's the scope? I asked. He didn't sugarcoat it. Over 200,000 units affected across multiple states. Altered expiration dates, falsified batch records, missing quality inspection logs. We've already quarantined 3 major shipments and issued an emergency cease distribution order. He wasn't finished. We've also identified emails sent by Mr. Maddox authorizing staff to bypass safety protocols, some using language you described in your original reports. I swallowed. So, what happens now? He answered like a hammer dropping. Mandatory recall. Facility shutdown. Potential criminal charges pending final analysis. And then, like it was almost an afterthought, he added. We're recommending your reinstatement and full legal protection under federal whistleblower provisions. That includes job recovery, back pay, and any punitive damages you choose to pursue. I didn't respond right away. The word that echoed in my head wasn't back pay. It wasn't reinstatement. It was vindication. By noon, the press conference was live. The FDA stood in front of a podium outside the Timberline facility. I watched it stream on my phone from my car. Inspector Novak said everything that needed saying. Our investigation confirms that expired food was being relabeled and shipped. The whistleblower who came forward, whose name will remain confidential, provided crucial documentation that made this action possible. Let me be clear, the safety of American families is not negotiable. And then came the headline. FDA confirms intent to pursue criminal charges against facility manager Trevor Maddox. I leaned back in my seat. That part was personal. He tried to destroy me. Tried to make me look obsolete. Disloyal. Disposable. But all his performance plans, his lectures, his forced termination, none of it could stand against the truth. And the truth had teeth now. I called Darren. You ready for the full interview? He chuckled. Oh, I've been ready. You just tell me when and where. We met that evening, off camera at first. I told him about the moment I heard Trevor laugh while sticking fake labels on meat going to grocery stores. I told him about the emails, the forced isolation, the looks from my crew who didn't know whether to trust me or follow orders. I told him about the kids in Omaha. His voice got low. Do you ever think about what would have happened if you'd stayed quiet? I nodded. Every night. Then I looked him dead in the eye. But I didn't. I thought the worst was over. The warehouse shut down. Trevor disgraced. The FDA doing what they were supposed to do. I was finally breathing again, sleeping through the night. But as it turns out, the game wasn't finished. It was just beginning. 2 days after the raid, I got an email. Not from the FDA. Not from Darren. It was from a blocked sender. Subject line, they knew. Attached was a single PDF. I opened it, and my stomach dropped. It was an internal memo. From 6 weeks earlier. Addressed to Timberline's regional director and senior compliance officers. It referenced my original internal report, the one I thought was ignored. Except it wasn't. Potential whistleblower identified as Samuel Ruiz. Termination recommended to mitigate exposure. Risk of audit considered low. I stared at the screen in disbelief. They hadn't just overlooked me. They had conspired to silence me. Trevor hadn't acted alone. Timberline's higher-ups had seen my warnings, acknowledged the risks, and made a strategic decision to fire me rather than fix the problem. This wasn't just about one corrupt general manager. This was systemic. My hands were shaking as I forwarded the file to Inspector Novak. She called me 10 minutes later. Sammy, this changes everything. They knew, I repeated. Yes. Which means this is no longer just a facility-level violation. This implicates the corporate chain of command. I thought about all the names I trusted at that company. The same people who'd shaken my hand at holiday parties. Who'd sent me thank you emails after spotless inspections. Who'd looked me in the eye and called me family. Now I had proof they'd sold me out behind closed doors to protect their bonuses. Novak continued. With this memo, we're expanding the investigation to include corporate leadership. The Department of Justice will likely get involved. Trevor was no longer the highest head on the chopping block. And I wasn't done either. I met with Carla, my union rep, and our attorney. With the memo now part of the case, we had grounds for a multi-claim lawsuit, wrongful termination, whistleblower retaliation, defamation, and emotional distress. You understand, Carla said carefully, this could get very public, very fast. You might be painted as the enemy by Timberline's legal team. I looked at her. They already treated me like one, I said. Now I'm just returning the favor. 2 days later, it was official. DOJ subpoena issued to Timberline Foods corporate headquarters. Trevor's firing was no longer enough. He was called back for federal testimony. Multiple executives were placed on administrative leave. And the press? They ate it up. Darren's full exposé went live that night. It showed everything, Trevor relabeling packages, the leaked memo, my FDA report, the hospitalization of the 3 children, and finally, a shadowed interview clip of me. I didn't use my full name on camera. But my voice was unmistakable. When they fired me, I thought I lost everything. But the truth? The moment they let me go, they gave me freedom. Freedom to burn down the lies they built their empire on. The segment ended with footage of the shuttered Timberline warehouse, chained doors, dark windows, and a sign flapping in the wind. Closed until further notice, federal investigation underway. That night, I got a call from someone I never expected. Luis. My old warehouse floor lead. Sammy, he said, his voice cracking. I'm sorry. I didn't know. None of us did. I closed my eyes. It's okay. You were just trying to keep your job. They're offering severance packages, he said. But only if we sign NDAs. And are you? He paused. Not a chance in hell. That's when I knew. I hadn't just brought down a corrupt manager. I'd lit a torch. And now, the people still standing in the shadows? They were stepping into the light, with me. They say justice is slow. But sometimes, when the truth comes crashing in, when it's armed with documents, footage, voices, and consequences, it moves like a freight train. 3 months after the raid, the Department of Justice issued formal charges against Trevor Maddox. Falsifying food safety records. Conspiracy to commit fraud. Reckless endangerment. And then came the big headline. Timberline Foods senior executives named in federal indictment. The memo I'd received anonymously. It cracked the entire company wide open. Turns out, the regional director and compliance VP had been working behind the scenes to suppress internal whistleblower reports, mine included. Not only did they approve my firing, they buried additional warnings from another supervisor who came forward after my story hit the news. Timberline Foods was now facing a $12.5 million class action lawsuit filed by affected consumers. Complete facility shutdowns in 2 states. A formal recall involving over 480,000 products. And me? I was asked to testify before a federal oversight committee as a key witness in the case. I walked into that courtroom with my head held high. Press cameras flashed. Reporters whispered. And for once, I didn't feel small. I felt seen. I told them everything, from the moment Trevor arrived, to the backdoor label switching, to the silence from corporate leadership. And when they asked why I didn't stay quiet, I looked them straight in the eye and said, because silence isn't safety. It's surrender. And I wasn't about to let families feed their kids expired food because someone wanted a bigger bonus. That testimony went viral. Jessica, my daughter, sent me a video clip from her dorm room, tears in her eyes. Dad, she wrote, they made you the villain, but now the whole world knows who the hero really was. A week later, I accepted the role at Keystone Fresh Logistics, not just as compliance director, but as the head of a new initiative, ethical oversight and whistleblower protection. They gave me a corner office, a full team, and the freedom to rebuild from the inside out. I even helped draft a corporate-wide ethics reform program, now adopted by other firms in our sector. Luis and 2 other former Timberline team leads. I hired them. And the kicker? When Trevor's trial began, guess who showed up to testify against him? One of the corporate execs who tried to bury my report. Turns out, rats jump ship when it's sinking. He flipped for immunity and confirmed everything in open court. Trevor's smug grin disappeared the moment his former ally said, we were told to protect profits. But Sammy Ruiz tried to protect people. Trevor was sentenced to 5 years in federal prison. He'll serve 2, maybe 3, but his name? Ruined. His LinkedIn is gone. His management credentials revoked. And every time someone Googles him, my face appears beside his, in news headlines, in interviews, in court documents. But not as his victim. as his reckoning. In the end, truth has a way of surfacing, even if it comes twisted through pain and betrayal. As one wise voice once said, sometimes your greatest enemy was once your closest ally. If this story struck a chord with you, let us know in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe, share, and spread the word, because justice deserves to be heard.